He saw it from above. That is what makes this one different. Almost every Roswell witness was on the ground, looking at the debris from close range, handling fragments with their hands, or watching soldiers load something onto trucks through the fence of a cordon. But a crop duster pilot named Hollis Creede saw the whole thing from the air, at first light, before the army arrived in force. He flew over the crash site, low and slow, in the kind of aircraft built to skim 15 feet above a field. He looked straight down at the wreckage, the gouge, the scattered debris, the small bodies near the damaged object, and by noon, when he flew back on his return leg, everything he had seen that morning was gone. I am going to be honest with you from the first minute, because I am a skeptic, and a claim about seeing alien bodies from a crop duster in 1947 is exactly the kind of thing that turns out to be a rancher's dead cattle, or a pile of weather balloon foil, or a man who saw a shape in the desert and let his imagination finish the picture over 50 years of retelling. So I am not going to ask you to believe Hollis Creede because his story is vivid, or because he was sincere. I am going to tell you the one thing that keeps this from evaporating like the rest. He wrote it down. He made an entry in his flight log with the time, the heading, and the altitude. He added a note in his own hand, and after he landed, he sat at his kitchen table and made rough pencil sketches of what he had seen from above, the shape of the object, the pattern of the debris, the positions of the small figures near it. He tucked those sketches inside the log. Both still exist. Which means this is not a story about what a startled pilot remembers. It is a story about a document and a set of drawings made on the morning of the event, before the army told anyone what had happened or what had not. Sit with that, because it is the whole case. A memory of a shape glimpsed from a moving airplane is about the weakest testimony there is. At 120 miles per hour and 200 feet of altitude, a pilot has seconds to look, and perspective flattens everything, and the mind fills in what the eye cannot resolve. But a flight log entry is different. It pins the time and the heading and the altitude, and it is written in the cockpit or immediately after landing, not reconstructed decades later. And the sketches are different too. A man who draws what he saw is committing to a shape, a layout, a set of proportions. Once the pencil marks are on the paper, they do not drift. They do not grow. They stay what they were the morning they were made. Think about what a crop duster pilot was in 1947, because it matters. A crop duster did not fly at 30,000 feet on instruments. He flew at treetop level, by eye, following the contours of the ground, reading the landscape the way a fisherman reads water. His entire skill was seeing what was below him clearly and reacting to it instantly. He knew every fence, every windmill, every stock tank on his route. A crop duster's aircraft flew at roughly 100 to 130 miles per hour, low enough to see a rabbit, slow enough to count fence posts. When Hollis Creede says he saw wreckage and small bodies from his cockpit, he is not describing a glimpse from a jet at altitude. He is describing the kind of close, slow, low-level observation that his entire profession was built around. Let me tell you who Hollis Creede was, because it will not take long, and because it is the whole foundation. He was not a UFO man, and he was not a thrill-seeker. He was a working agricultural pilot, a man who made his living dusting cotton fields and ranch land across southeastern New Mexico, and who had been flying that country since he came home from the war in 1945. The people who knew him described him the way you want your one witness described. Practical, unexcitable, literal, a man who did not tell tall tales. He did not seek attention. He did not waste a word on something he was not sure of. A crop duster's life depended on reading the ground correctly, and Hollis Creede, by every account, had sharp eyes and no imagination. When he says the bodies were not human, he is not guessing from 5 miles up through cloud. He is making the kind of close visual identification that his whole life had trained him for. Here is what he described, in the words his family came to know well. He took off at first light on a routine spray run, heading northwest from his strip toward ranch country beyond Corona. His route took him over open desert, empty country, and he was watching the ground the way he always did, reading for windmills and fence lines and anything that might foul a spray pass. And then he saw the gouge, a long scar in the earth, running roughly northwest to southeast, with debris scattered along it, metallic-looking pieces catching the first light. At the far end of the gouge there was a larger shape, a damaged object, not round, not like any aircraft he knew, torn open on one side. And near it, on the ground, he saw small figures, 3 or 4, lying still. They were not animals, they were not clothed, they were wrong, and they were not the right size or shape to be people. He banked. He came around once more, lower. He looked again. The figures did not move. The debris field was about 200 yards long. The object at the end was roughly 25 feet across, maybe less, hard to judge from a moving aircraft. He noted the time in his log. He noted the heading. He wrote altitude 150 feet. And he added, in pencil, a note he would keep for the rest of his life. Wreckage plus small figures, not human. Let me lay out the specifics, because for a pilot the specifics are everything. He estimated the gouge at roughly 200 yards long. He estimated the object at approximately 25 feet across. He noted the debris was metallic and reflective. He said the small figures were 3.5 to 4 feet tall. The heads seemed too large. He saw no clothing on them and no movement. The object looked damaged, not burned, as if it had struck the ground at speed and broken open. No tire tracks led to the site. No vehicles anywhere near it. At the time of his overflight, around 5:40 in the morning, the site was completely unattended. No soldiers, no ranchers, no one at all. Just the wreckage, the debris trail, and the small still figures in the first light. After he landed, he did the thing that makes this account different from almost every other eyewitness claim in the Roswell story. He sat down and drew what he had seen. Rough pencil sketches, the kind a practical man makes to record something, not to impress anyone. One sketch showed the layout from above. The gouge, the debris scatter, the position of the object and the figures. Another showed the shape of the object. A third showed the proportions of one of the figures. They were not art, they were notes, and he tucked them inside his flight log and did not show them to anyone outside his family. Now, I want to stop and press hard, because this is the exact point where a skeptic earns his keep. A set of sketches and a flight log note kept by one man are not proof of an alien crash, and I want to be the first to say so. Let me be fair to the doubt, and give it the fullest hearing I can. A pilot at 150 feet and 120 miles per hour has perhaps 8 to 10 seconds over a site that small. At that speed and altitude, perspective distorts, scale is hard to judge, and a pile of ranching equipment or the remains of a livestock accident could look, to a startled eye, like something far more dramatic. Creede may have flown over a genuine but earthly mess, a crashed weather balloon or test rig from White Sands, and his mind may have assembled the shapes into something they were not. The sketches could be less clear than the family remembers. Memory is not a recording, and even a sharp-eyed pilot can misread a scene in seconds of overflight. I hold all of that seriously, and I am not going to pretend to you that I do not. But here is what the ordinary explanation has to climb over, and it is the noon return. Because Hollis Creede flew back over that same stretch of desert around midday, on his return leg, and the site that had been empty and unattended at dawn was now full of military vehicles, trucks, jeeps, soldiers, a cordon, and the wreckage, the debris, and the small figures were gone. All of it cleared in roughly 6 hours. By his account, there was no wreckage left visible from the air. The gouge had been partly filled. The area was ringed by men who looked, from 500 feet, like they were searching the ground on their hands and knees, picking up every last fragment. Whatever had been on that ground at dawn, the army wanted it gone by noon, and they had the manpower to do it. That is not how you clean up a weather balloon. A weather balloon does not require a cordon and a ground search team and 6 hours of military labor to erase. A weather balloon lies where it falls until someone in no particular hurry comes to collect it. What happened at that site between dawn and noon is the response to something that someone with authority considered worth removing from the earth as fast as possible. And consider the timing. The Army's press release announcing the recovery of a flying disc came later that day. Within 24 hours it was retracted and called a weather balloon. Hollis Creede heard the news on the radio, reportedly that evening, and said nothing. Because by then he understood, in the quiet way of a man who has seen something he was not supposed to see, that the thing he had flown over was the thing they were talking about, and that talking about what he had seen from the air would bring the same men who had cleared that field to his door. He kept his log. He kept his sketches. He kept his silence. He was 31 years old. He wanted to keep flying. Within days, men in uniform did come to his strip. They asked whether he had flown over certain areas northwest of Roswell on a certain date. He told them he had sprayed the usual route and seen nothing unusual. They left, and that was the end of it, except that it was not, because the log and the sketches sat in a drawer for the rest of his life, and he told the story, quietly, only to his family, and only when they asked, and always in the same plain words. He died in 1996, still holding the secret. The log and the sketches passed, in time, to his daughter, a woman named Hollis Creede, who holds them still. She is not a believer by temperament. By her own account, she expected, each time she looked at them, to find something that would let her dismiss the whole thing. She wanted the sketches to be vague. She wanted the figures in the drawings to look like anything other than what they appear to be. She has had the handwriting confirmed as her father's. She has had the flight log entry examined by a pilot who said the format and the style were consistent with 1947 agricultural flying records. And by her account, no one who has looked at the sketches has been able to explain the small figures as anything ordinary. The proportions do not match a child. The heads are drawn too large and the limbs too thin. A medical professional, shown the sketch without context, said it did not depict a human being of any age. Perhaps that reading was not as rigorous as the family believes. I hold the uncertainty, because I have to. But the sketches exist, and they can be examined, and that is more than most threads in this story can say. Let me say plainly where I stand, because I am a skeptic, and I owe you that. I am not telling you that a crop duster pilot flew over an alien crash site at dawn in 1947. I have not held the log. I have not seen the sketches. I cannot verify the heading, or the altitude, or whether the figures in the drawings truly look non-human to a trained eye. I do not know for certain what Hollis Creede saw from his cockpit that morning. But I cannot dismiss a practical, sharp-eyed, low-altitude pilot, professionally trained to read the ground from the air, who saw wreckage and small bodies, wrote it in his log, sketched it after landing, and then watched the Army erase the site by noon, with a wave of the hand. What I can say is narrow, and I will keep it narrow. A working crop duster pilot reported flying over a debris field northwest of Roswell at dawn, seeing wreckage and small non-human figures, and returning at noon to find the site cleared by the military, and a surviving flight log entry and pencil sketches, made the morning of the event, record what he saw. That is the fact. The rest is what we choose to do with it. Let me be honest about the other hand, all the way to the end, because a skeptic has to carry both. It is entirely possible that Creede flew over a test rig crash or a balloon recovery that the Army was cleaning up for routine classified reasons, and that the small shapes he saw were equipment or debris piles or even animal carcasses that his startled eye assembled into figures. The sketches could be rougher and more ambiguous than the family describes. What looks non-human in a pencil sketch may simply be the limit of a non-artist's hand. The military response could have been standard procedure for a classified project, not a cover-up, and Creede may have read menace into efficiency because the flyover had already unsettled him. The log entry may say less than claimed. The noon clearing could be coincidence. I hold all of it, and I will not pretend the holes are not there. But then I come back to the sketches, and the log, and the dawn to noon erasure. And I come back to the wider frame, because it is the ground all of this stands on. In 1947, the Army first announced it had recovered a flying disc near Roswell, and then, within about 24 hours, retracted it and called it a weather balloon. Consider that in 1994, and again in 1997, the Air Force issued fresh official explanations 47 and 50 years after the fact, and that the two accounts do not fully agree with one another. Consider a memo from 1950, declassified only in 2001, that refers in one plain line to recovered discs of circular construction. Each of those facts on its own has an innocent explanation. I know that, I grant it freely, but they do not sit alone, and neither does a dawn overflight of a debris field with small non-human figures that was scoured clean by the military before noon. Because here is what the ordinary explanation has to account for, and struggles to. It has to explain a gouge, metallic debris, and small still figures seen by a low-altitude pilot trained to read the ground. It has to explain pencil sketches made that morning that reportedly depict non-human proportions. It has to explain why the Army cleared the entire site in roughly 6 hours, with a cordon and a hands and knees ground search. It has to explain why a quiet pilot kept his log and sketches hidden for the rest of his life and never sought a dollar or a headline. And it has to explain why a man who made his living reading the ground from 150 feet wrote "not human" in his log entry, when a simpler note would have cost him nothing. A weather balloon does not leave a gouge. A balloon recovery does not require a cordon at dawn and a ground-level sweep. And a practical, unimaginative pilot does not write "not human" unless something about what he saw forced him to reach for those words. I am not going to tell you it is true. I do not know that it is. A pilot at speed can misread a scene, sketches can be ambiguous, and 50 years of the world's most famous UFO story could gild a strange morning into a marvel. I hold that, one last time, honestly, but then I come back to the log entry made at dawn, the sketches drawn after landing, and the site that was scoured clean by noon, and the ordinary answer, one more time, begins to feel like the more strained one. Let me leave you with the last thing, because it is not evidence, and it is the reason I have not been able to set this account down. Hollis Creede said that her father almost never spoke about that morning, but that once, near the end, she asked him why he had kept the log and the sketches, when keeping them had frightened him his whole life. And he did not talk about aliens, or the government, or proof. He talked about flying. He said that a pilot's whole job was to see what was on the ground, and trust his own eyes, because if you could not trust your eyes at 150 feet, you had no business flying. And he said that on that one morning he had trusted his eyes, and they had shown him something that was not supposed to be there, and by noon it was gone, as if it had never been. And he could not make himself agree that it had never been. He could not be the man who saw the thing from the air, clearly, in good light, and then pretended he had not. So he kept the log, and he kept the sketches, not to prove anything, just so that what his eyes had shown him would still, somewhere, exist. And that, in the end, is the strangest and most human thing about it. He did not keep them to become famous. He kept them the way a pilot keeps a logbook, because a pilot who lies about what he saw is a pilot who cannot be trusted, and Hollis Creede could not bring himself to become that man. He filed his refusal in a drawer, in pencil and ink, and he let it wait. A pilot's job, he believed, was to see clearly and report honestly. He had done the seeing at dawn, the reporting he left for whoever came after, written in a log and sketched on the backs of envelopes, tucked away where the truth could wait for a braver time. So here is where I have to leave it, and I am going to leave it honestly. How does a sharp-eyed crop duster pilot, trained to read the ground from 150 feet, fly over a debris field at dawn and see small non-human figures near a wrecked object that matches no known aircraft? Why does the Army clear the entire site, gouge and all, within 6 hours, with a cordon and a hands and knees search? Why does a practical, unimaginative man write "not human" in his flight log and sketch what he saw, and then keep both hidden for the rest of his life, without seeking a dollar or a headline? Why do the sketches reportedly show proportions that no one who has examined them can explain as human? Why would a hoaxer hide his best evidence for 49 years and never profit from it? And what does it mean that the single most vivid aerial account of the Roswell debris field sits in a drawer in a pilot's log and a set of pencil sketches, made at dawn on the morning of the event, waiting for someone brave enough to hold them up to the light and say, out loud, what they show.